Hi, your next challenge is called X's and O's Nobody Knows. You are to create a function that takes a string. It checks if it has the same number of X's and O's and returns either true or false. So return a Boolean value, which is true or false as we know. The string can contain any character, so it's not simply just X's and O's. And finally, when no X and no O are in the string, return true. And that seems logical, right? Because 0 is equal to 0. That's the same count. It's just a 0 count. I think that's clear, but consult the examples as needed. Pay attention that case sensitivity does not matter here. So they still called this a true, even though one of the x's is capitalized. Here's an example with no x's or o's. And yeah, I think those all make sense. Must be case insensitive, so yeah, we already covered the items in the notes. Let's head over to code. Please pause the video and give this a good attempt. You got this, and resume the video when you're ready. Okay, so we know that strings underneath it are character arrays. They're arrays of characters. So I wanted to use the array class to take advantage of the array input and use this for each method that's going to kind of iterate over all of the elements in the collection in the array, and it will perform an action for each element as we iterate over each. So an action, think of that as a function that returns void. And we know that these t's are generics. They're sort of placeholders, so these things can be used with all different sorts of types. And that's very convenient. Even though it looks a little difficult, it means we don't have to implement these things separately for every type, which would be obnoxious. So that's all that is. Action returns void. Remember, we had that func one where you'll have a return type as well. But with action, you're returning void. So if t is a char, you know the signature of a function that could work for this is going to return void and take a single input of char. The parameter will be a char. That's all that is. So, action performed. You can look at the examples below if you'd like. This is the kind of thing we're going to do. Array for each, give it the collection, and then you specify the action. In this case, I'm not going to do the step of setting up this delegate. I'm just going to use a lambda to do it in place. And that makes sense for our case because it's kind of a throwaway method that it doesn't really apply to the class in any other cases. So it's not worth me creating member variables just to sort of do the work of this particular task, so to speak. So, yeah, let's get into it. Okay, string. So we know that we can call this array, and I didn't show it, but I assume we need, let's go look at it, see, namespace system. Let's make sure we add that so we don't get yelled at. Array, we saw it's called for each. We give it the collection, which is string, right? In this case, I'm explicitly calling char. This will make it very explicitly an array of characters, and for each applies to an array, right? Now, I'm going to give my action here, and I'm going to do it in the form of a lambda. It's just kind of a one-off throwaway thing. It's not a function that I need for anything else. Breaking things out into methods are nice for reusability purposes. If you just kind of have a one-off thing here, you know, it's a throwaway, it's a good case to use some kind of anonymous function. So we're going to do that here. I've been using ch as the variable name for char, but feel free to name your variable however you like. So what are we doing here? Okay, and this is going to be a good example too. I'm going to do a multi-line lambda. All the other ones we've done have been very small. They've been able to be written out right in place without making the line ridiculously long, but this one would be very long, and it would be less readable if we did it all in one line, so we'll see an example of that. I'm going to add these braces to define the scope here. I have a series of statements I want to execute, not just one. Or I should say one, maybe it's one compound statement. Okay, so I'm going to say if. Now remember, this was case insensitive, right? So I'm going to convert the character to lowercase to make my comparison. So, and we've done that in other videos, char has a to lower method. I'm going to take the character and convert it to a lowercase letter to make the comparison simple. Then I don't have to check against lowercase o and uppercase o. If I just make it lower, I can do this one comparison against. We'll start with x. If that's the case, and I got a little ahead of myself here, I'm going to define these in place variables. Let's call them x count 0 and o count equals 0. Good. We can refer to these. If it is equal to x, let's increment our x count. Else, if char to lower equals lowercase o, increment the o count. So that's about all I have to do here. I'm going to go over all of the characters in the array, and if they hit x or o, regardless of case, I'm going to increment these counters. Okay, so that these curly braces were the scope of my compound statement there. That closes the for each statement. I'm going to drop my semicolon right there. And then finally at the end, I can simply return x count is equal to o count. Right? And that should tell us what we want. Note that if there are no x's and o's, these will never get incremented. They've already been initialized at 0, which is what they should get by default. And then we're returning 0 equals to 0, which is true, and so it works in that special edge case that they listed in the instructions. So I think I'll give this a run. Hopefully this doesn't look too crazy. You will see these lambdas though with multiple lines. You're going to see that, so feel free to format it in a way however you like. I like to put in these curly braces here, and it kind of looks like what you're used to inside of a function with the curly braces, but you know, if there's a way that works better for you, you can do it, or if your team has a rule, follow your team's rule. Cool. There we have it. So yeah, that was a lambda, longer than one line. That's our biggest lambda we've done in this series. So hopefully you see the same structure there, you know, and this might even help you visualize what the lambda is, this whole anonymous function thing, right? It looks like the body of a function, right? If you just stripped out the name of it and the parameter, you know, the parameter is listed here. So yeah, maybe that gives you another perspective on lambdas. So yeah, feel free to share your solutions, add your questions below. There are no dumb questions, and I hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching.